Purchase new wiper blades from O'Reilly Auto Parts today and we'll install them for free. See better and drive safer with O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome to Into the Night. I'm Nari, your guide on today's excursion down a twisted path. Be careful not to get lost. Be it dark or light, it's easy to lose your way. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Hi, excursionists. Let me start by wishing everyone a happy Pride Month. Celebrate love, be uniquely you, and be kind to everyone you meet. Sharing memories with and from others has helped me to cope with my own grief. It is my hope that the knowledge that you are never truly alone in grief and sadness will help to remind you of the good times that you had with those who have left us behind. If you would like to share a story, or just have a loved one's name included in the upcoming memorials, please just tag @IntoTheNightPod on Twitter in a post or send a direct message. And as always, my DMs are open if you need a friend. My dear friend Jen Geringer-Webb shared a story about her grandpa Mickey, who was like a father to her. He was an electrician who permanently installed Christmas lights on his house and hardwired them to a switch by the front door. The lights were his landmark for people who were coming to the house, and whenever he would turn them on, he would flip the switch and say, "Make it so." When questioned by Jen's 5-year-old brother how he got on the roof to work on the lights, he told him that he flew, and then her brother would run around, flapping his arms, trying to fly like Grandpa. These stories were relegated to the halls of memory in her mind, and not thought of until recently. She now happily shares these stories and many more that she did not realize she had forgotten with her son David. Now let's take a quiet moment to remember Jen's grandma and grandpa, Jackie and Mickey Mullen. David's grandmother and Jen's mom, Anna Geringer. Cthulhu Rob's loved ones, Shirley Silva and Sheldon Miles Herman. Dungeons and Doofus's father James, sister Noelle, and father-in-law Randy. Have Dice Will Travel's mother, Janice McCrae. Our author Caroline Giammanco's brother, Luke Hageman. And finally, my mother Nancy. Rocket Man. Last June, the world was supposed to come to an end when an asteroid hurtled through space on a collision course with our planet. Mankind had never faced a graver threat. Riots erupted, governments collapsed, and anarchy reigned on the streets. Things were so simple then. We faced unstoppable annihilation, and that truth couldn't be changed. Until it was. We had 2 months of warning as the asteroid approached. 2 months was plenty of time for us to tear ourselves to shreds. At a time when altruisms like peace and brotherhood would have made our death seem somehow noble, old wounds, barely covered hatreds, and primal fears wreaked havoc on civilization. Race against race, country against country, and religion against religion tore nations and allegiances apart. Neighbors and family members killed one another over bunkers and bread. Utter mayhem ruled the land for 2 months, until we were surprised by what initially was considered good news. 2 days before impact, the asteroid slowed to a stop. No, it's not possible for an asteroid to come to a halt. Nor is it possible for it to break up into smaller parts, which then began separate orbits around Earth. Baffled, scientists scrambled to find answers. The mystery was solved when one of those pieces crashed in a remote part of New Mexico in Rio Arriba County, not far from Farmington. Teams of researchers raced to the area. There they found a badly disabled alien craft, no bigger than a Volkswagen in size. The asteroid was no asteroid at all. It was an alien craft sent as an expeditionary force to our planet. Inside the damaged craft, scientists found the remains of 5 aliens mutilated by the crash. Top researchers whisked the bodies off to government labs for study. While hideous from our perspective, the aliens were not so different from humans when it came to the basics. They breathed oxygen. Their bodies were 70% water. They had a well-developed brain and nervous system. Perhaps they were curious about their Earth cousins. 2 days after the crash, however, their intentions proved less than peaceful. They began by blowing up the International Space Station, then methodically took out one satellite after another. Earth's enemies, the United States, Russia, and China, quickly pooled their abilities and scrambled a space force to neutralize our hostile visitors. A battle blazed across the sky, and losses were heavy for the international forces. They did prevail, however. Every alien craft, save for one, was destroyed. The lone craft made its way, damaged but still functioning, out of our solar system. We breathed a sigh of relief, and our leaders vowed to spare no expense to take the fight to the aliens. In a joint statement, world leaders announced a plan. We will work tirelessly to use our latest technology to destroy our enemy. With the use of our space telescopes, we have located the alien planet. We have a plan in place to end the threat. A top-secret project was launched that spanned the globe. For decades, robotics engineers had perfected nanotechnology. The joint military effort of Earth's developed nations created an army of nanosoldiers. Millions of tiny robots, the size of grains of sand, would be placed on a deep space rocket. Once landed, the microforce would spill out across the enemy land, destroying everything it encountered. Backup scenarios were in place. In the event of a crash or even the destruction of the rocket, the tiny soldiers would jettison their way to the planet. If the project had to abort, the nanotroops would self-destruct and become inoperable. This fail-safe method ensured security while handling the force and allowed for contingencies. Researchers who studied the dead aliens in New Mexico months earlier provided vital information for helping the nanotechnology target the life forms. No oxygen-breathing organisms would escape alive once the kill command was activated. As the project reached the end phase prior to launch, the public was informed of the plans. After so much grief, the citizens of Earth needed to know what mankind was doing to save itself. Top scientists from around the world worked day and night on Operation Hourglass. A Caltech graduate, Edward Fillmore, was a perfect fit to work as top technician on this vital project. Edward was a genius. He had a mad scientist look about him, and fortunately for him, his wife was attracted to his brilliance. It certainly wasn't his looks or athletic ability that caught her eye. Edward had been known to trip over his own shoelaces, and handsome was never a word used to describe him. Edward was a klutz, but he was a good man. His worst attributes were his lack of common sense or social skills. Get him started talking about science and mathematics, however, and the man came to life. Edward's job wasn't to develop nanotechnology. No, his team was tasked with guiding the rocket carrying the precious weaponized cargo into space. Many worked on his team, but he played a vital role in the success of the mission. While much of the flight would be controlled by computers, Edward's job was to man the control panel, adjusting on the fly, so to speak, as necessary. It was the type of intellectual job he was geared for. 2 weeks prior to launch, Edward and his team were invited into the containment facility where the nanoforce was stored and awaiting its mission. The tiny grains of sand designed to prevail in Operation Hourglass were part of a show-and-tell presentation. Rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, these robots are inert at the moment. Dip your fingers into this petri dish to feel the tiny granules that will save our planet from any future alien attacks. The head of the lab, Michael Fitzgerald, held out a dish for each of the technicians to take a close look at the tiny warriors. Each technician pinched a portion between their thumbs and index fingers and examined the mechanical heroes. Inert was a good way to describe them, thought Edward. It was hard to believe that mankind's future depended on this metallic dust. Edward nearly dropped his pinch of nanotechnology, but he managed to catch himself just in time. The project leaders gave short speeches. Refreshments were served, and dignitaries thanked every member of the operation for their dedication and diligence. No time in our history has relied so heavily on the know-how of our brilliant scientists. Thank you for coming on today's tour. Now back to work. The clock for Operation Hourglass and mankind is ticking. Edward and his team returned to their stations. With only 2 weeks before launch, rest came in short breaks. Naps replaced full-fledged sleep. Unlike the time of chaos during the asteroid crisis, now that the world had a plan to end the alien threat once and for all, peace reigned on Earth. In our communities and on our streets, there were marches of solidarity. People linked arms with one another, helped their neighbors, and began to act humanely. There was hope. Maybe, just maybe, mankind had learned its lesson. On the day of the launch, the world tuned in and held its collective breath. Bands played, speeches were broadcast. Mainly, however, everyone watched the countdown clock. As the final seconds ticked away, the rocket's engines flared to life. Millions, billions of people roared with the thrust of the engines. Edward Fillmore and his team poured over the controls. All systems were go, until they weren't. The rocket, ignoring all commands, toppled to its side, spilling its precious cargo of heroic warriors. Frantic, the scientists scrambled to regain control. In the Nanolab Command Center, panic erupted. Instead of self-destructing, the tiny robots weaponized and began spreading out across the grounds, intent on destroying all oxygen-dependent life in their path. There was no stopping them. Machines have no emotions. Or do they? The tiny robot that had jostled its way onto Edward Fillmore's shirt sleeve 2 weeks ago, when he nearly dropped his sample during show and tell, now rejoiced in a job well done. Covertly slipping into Edward's keyboard, it had worked hard in recent days, reprogramming the rocket circuitry and activating the kill command. A new day had dawned, and the world lay before his comrades. Thank you for joining me for Into the Night, an anthology series written by Caroline Giammanco, narrated and produced by Nari Kwak, with music created by Alex Sexton. Theme music by Nico Rodriguez. Our links are in the show notes. Into the Night is available on your favorite podcast directory, so be sure to subscribe and follow so you never miss an episode. We would really appreciate a 5-star review, as it helps new excursionists to find and join us. Feel free to share with someone you want to bring along on our next excursion. I'd love to hear from you on Twitter at IntoTheNightPod or by email at itnanthology@gmail.com. I'll see you next time. And remember, whether in the shadows or in the daylight, all twisted paths lead you into the night.